Star Wars Battlefront Twilight Company is a really long and clunky title. It is also a book that was meant to tie in with the first Battlefront game made by EA. The story follows one of the rebellion's infantry companies as they do battle against the Empire. Now, a simple synopsis like this might lead you to believe that this is a story all about action and military strategy, when in actuality, the book is about a lot of things. The first thing we need to establish about this book is the state of the galaxy. This story starts after the events of the Battle of Yavin. After the destruction of the Death Star, the rebellion decided to invade the mid-rim of the galaxy. This failed because the Empire was not significantly hurt by the loss of the Death Star. They still had more ships, men, and material than the rebellion. So the rebels are retreating to the Outer Rim and Twilight is providing cover for the fleet. I'm gonna be really honest here, I have no idea how any of this makes sense. So, we start off the novel and meet our main character, Namir. He is a sergeant in Twilight and a squad leader. Alongside his squad mates, Gadrim, Brand, and Charmer, they fight their way through the streets of a world named Hadoral Prime. This ends with them taking the governor of the world in as a prisoner, and Charmer gets hurt bad enough that they need a replacement. Enter Roach, a young woman from Hadoral who is also a drug addict. And this fact pretty much only comes up once in the entirety of the novel. We then get to meet the commander of the company, Howl. Despite being the commander of the company, Howl is not that crucial to the story and most of his dialogue is nonsense. We also find out why the governor of Hadoral is important enough to take as a prisoner. She has a complete map of the logistical network of the Empire. With that information, Hal says they can shift the war in the rebels' favor. But he needs to see if the information is good, so he sends Namir and his squad to test it out on the next planet they go to. Before that happens, they come under attack on their transport ship, the Thunderstrike, which is a Corellian corvette that was modified to serve as a troop transport. No idea why it had to be modified, considering that these ships already have crew quarters and the like. But, regardless, the attack causes a fire aboard, and the governor, a woman by the name of Avari Chalice, is put in danger because of it. Namir races off to check the situation and finds that the guard outside of Chalice's cell is unconscious. He opens the modified airlock and all three wait out the battle in a confined space with no air circulation. And they only managed to survive this because there was just enough air. After that harrowing encounter, they go to a planet named Coerdi, which is a rotting jungle planet with a bioweapons factory run by the Empire. They spend most of their time hiking through the jungle until they reach an Imperial camp and take it out. The whole fight is relatively short and has no casualties. They also fight an ATST walker, which they beat by tricking its crew into a mire and cause the thing to sink. Which sounds really interesting, except that we get almost no details on how they managed to pull it off. Just a short sentence about how they need to bring it down, and then it being brought down. So after that, they make it to the bioweapons plant and destroy it, after which they head to extraction and nearly die to exposure to one of the toxins inside. After they are rescued, they are told that they were exposed to an unrefined version of a toxin, and that they would be fine and make a full recovery. No idea how that works, because I would think any sort of disease or toxin might mess them up for a while regardless of if it was weaponized or not. But regardless, the ship is then attacked again, and the droid mechanic says that they are leaking something that the Imperials are using to track them. They don't have the parts to fix the leak, and Hal gets his people together to find a solution. Chalice has one, but she knows that if she says it, then it will be shut down immediately. So she prods Namir to say it instead. He does, and everyone approves. They decide that the best course of action is to raid an Imperial transport and steal the parts they need via a boarding action. Namir feels used and likes Chalice less for using him this way, but my question is, why? It was the best plan, and no one trusts her, so of course she needed him to suggest it. For some reason, the novel tries to paint her as an untrustworthy devil on Namir's shoulder, and while she is wrong about some things, she is more often right. She is wrong about Vader tracking them to kill her, but she is right that the Empire wants her dead and is tracking her. So, they head to a system and wait for a transport to appear so they can raid it. When it arrives, Chalice contacts them and gets them to move closer for the raid. At first it doesn't work until she reveals who she is and threatens the ship. Then they board the ship, Namir and Chalice talk for a bit, and the action begins. Except, then she goes on to talk about some unimportant stuff involving their respective backstories. Then they get shot at and move towards the bridge. Once they get there, Namir and Chalice check to see if the parts they need are aboard. Namir also listens to the other squad's reports. They are in the middle of intense firefights that are matters of life and death. And we get no details or descriptions of them, so it's very exciting. Then after they confirm everything is there, Namir wants to get Chalice out, but she wants to protect the engineers going to get the parts. Then they get them and leave. She was saying something about if the mission fails, then that means there was no point, but anyways. They have a funeral for those that died in recent actions, and Namir and Chalice talk a bit about where they come from. Both come from backwater worlds and struggle to survive the conditions they found themselves in. Hal informs Namir that they will be going to the High Command secret base with Chalice to discuss a plan involving her know-how of the Imperial Logistics Network. Namir goes to the recreation area that the company has set up and talks about why they fight for the rebellion, which is a recurring theme in this novel. After that, Chalice and Namir talk for a bit, and then they leave for Hoth. After arriving, they are greeted by a general, and he gives them a short speech, which Namir figures is sincere and kinda hates the guy for it. I have no idea why he would dislike him, but Namir acts like a moody teen despite being probably in his 20s. The Twilight members who came with them are assigned to duties at Echo Base, and Namir learns that a lot of people here are trained like a proper military instead of an insurgency. There is a conference that we do not get to see, but there are rumors aplenty around the base. Rumors that are just references to the movies, including mentions of a Bothan spy. Namir has a chat over a meal with some members of Echo Base. Here, Namir shows his ignorance. The rest of the rebels are excitedly talking about how they are in a position to win with the new strategy being developed. Namir chimes in and starts talking about how taking and holding Coruscant is going to be impossible because of the amount of people on the planet. He starts talking about the civilian populace rising up against the rebellion when they have to start bombing the planet and killing civilians in the streets, both of which are tactics the rebels would never use. And on top of that, he says the people of Coruscant must like the Empire or be indifferent. And while there are a lot of Imperial sympathizers on the planet, there's not that many. Essentially, since he grew up on a backwater, he has no idea how this stuff works and only knows about war as a savage and brutal conflict like what he experienced as a kid. And he's killing morale by saying this stuff, which he should know since he's in a leadership position in the military. Namir then continues to push one of the soldiers, on purpose, into a fight. He gets healed up and then gets put on cargo duty and talks with a middle-aged man about the rebellion. The guy calls Namir a cynic, and Namir admits that he never wants to stop fighting a war. He hates the idea of winning. The old man tells Namir he needs to either get with what the rebellion believes in or leave. Then Hal tells him that they are going back and Chalice is staying to work with the High Command. Namir and Chalice speak and she thinks an attack won't come. Don't know where she gets that idea from. And it's not really a clever line, and it's kind of annoying because we have seen the movies and know that the Empire is coming. And they do, and the battle progresses as you would expect. But there is one odd standout moment. The novel describes a gory scene of a woman being trapped in the gears of an AT-ST and then suicide bombing the machine in the nearby stormtroopers. It goes on to describe how she's caught in the gears and how messed up her arm is and how she can't break free, thus leading to the suicide attack. The survivors of Twilight then retreat back to Echo Base, and that's where Namir finds Chalice and Hal. Unfortunately, as they're escaping, they come across Darth Vader, and so the entirety of Twilight on Hoth gets wiped out, with the exception of Namir, who got knocked unconscious, and Chalice, who was force-choked by Vader. Meanwhile, on the Thunderstrike, the Imperials captured a ship and docked it with the Thunderstrike pretending to be rebels. They capture the bridge, and the rest of Namir's squad takes them out. The realization that the Imperials were on the way makes the rebel flotilla in the area run before they get destroyed. A Star Destroyer shows up and offers clemency in exchange for Chalice. The Thunderstrike gets out of there before they get blown up because they don't have Chalice. The Thunderstrike then moves to Ankoro to make repairs and wait for Howl. The planet is seedy and full of criminals, but this is the type of world where the rebels can hide for a while. Namir and Chalice arrive and find that Twilight has low morale and that the chain of command is utterly broken. The company holds a funeral for Howl and reminisces about him for a bit, and afterwards Namir starts to think about his priorities and decides to fully believe in the rebel cause, not for him, but for Twilight. They contact High Command and confirm that they do not have any additional orders. But Chalice has a plan. She comes up with something called Operation Ringbreaker, a plan to cripple the Imperial war effort with all of it building to a strike on the Kuat shipyards. I'm not going to go over why this is dumb right now, but trust me, this is actually pretty stupid. Twilight begins to work on this plan and it immediately goes to hell. Every world they go to, they take pretty severe casualties on, and it starts wearing down the men and women of Twilight. What experienced members of the company are left are fed into a plan that even Chalice begins to doubt. See, on one world they go to, they get hit by the same kinds of toxins that were on Coerti. And Chalice admits that she did not anticipate the Empire's stockpiles, and Namir can't grasp the larger strategy because of his lack of understanding about advanced technology and the scale of the galaxy. After 3 worlds, their next target is Sullust, and this is where things change. Twilight begins to attack the main processing plant on the planet, and it goes pretty well. They take the facility without many casualties and are getting ready for extraction when it happens. The Thunderstrike is ambushed on the way back, and as it's descending down through the cloud layer, TIE fighters overwhelm the ship and cause it to crash on the surface. And with that, the rebels dig in and wait for the inevitable siege. Chalice points out that they cannot hold out against a Star Destroyer and suggests they try to find help in the nearby city. Upon arrival, they find a rebel safe house, and Namir finds out about how their plan has affected Sullust. But it bothers him. Probably because in one of the flashback chapters we see that Hal told him that attacking civilians and focusing on only military targets is bad. Not really sure why that's the case, but I'm just going to go with it. They then get attacked by stormtroopers who take Namir captive. He gets rescued by the local rebels and helps out some of the civilians that are being harmed because the stormtroopers are rounding up people and it's getting pretty bad for the civilians. Namir realizes that the plan Chalice came up with that has caused the people of Sullust to suffer, as they have to make up for the failures in the logistical network. He plans to reunite with Twilight to try and help the people of Sullust, realizing that he had emulated Hal but didn't focus on the foundations of the rebellion, which is to help people get free from the tyranny of the Empire. He talks to his old squad mates and tries to convince them to go with his plan to help the people. Meanwhile, Chalice pulls a blaster on Namir to try and make him stop, but Gadrin saves him. Namir puts the plan into motion, which is to distract the Imperials so that the rebels in the city can take over. To that end, Twilight fights a hard battle that gets a lot of them either killed or injured, but they use the lava that flows all over Sullust to their advantage. They dig tunnels that burn out the garrison structures, stopping reinforcements and killing a lot of troopers. The rebels win the day, but Chalice manages to escape during the battle. See, she made it to a ship, and then went aboard a Star Destroyer that was arriving to aid the Imperial garrison. There she meets 2 characters I haven't mentioned yet, and uses an ion bomb to disable the ship bad enough that it has to flee. With that done, the rebels take over Sullust and officially liberate the world. After liberating the world, Chalice leaves and decides to be an information broker, or something like that, and she decides to head for Namir's homeworld of Crucible. Twilight holds an open recruiting event and licks their wounds before wondering what adventure they will have next. The book is poorly paced as there is a constant start-stop progression of chapters. Out of the 43 chapters in this book, they are split between flashbacks to Nimir's past, to Boar's perspective as he hunts Twilight, and a stormtrooper on Sullust. The flashback chapters are not relevant to the story, as their only purpose is to give Nimir's backstory, and only one chapter is relevant, which I mentioned before. The chapters showing the Imperial perspective give away their plans and offer nothing aside from setting up that Prelate Verge is a zealot for the Empire, which Chalice also mentions in other chapters. And his zealotry only comes in at the very end when he gives an order that forces Tabor to shoot him. Meanwhile, the Stormtrooper's perspective is meant to show how things are progressing on Sullust, which Nimir figures out after they arrive, making those chapters entirely pointless. The use of military terminology is baffling because they are not being used properly. Mobile infantry, for example, was coined during World War II and described infantry that used vehicles to aid in rapid deployment and advancement. Meanwhile, Twilight Company does not have any vehicles that help them out except for dropships and speeders. So they're just a normal infantry company, not mobile infantry. The company is also described as an army at one point, and Chalice assumes that they can take a world like Kuat. The thing is a company is only a fraction of an army, and while a company could take a planet that is defended by a company or less of stormtroopers, they could never take a world like Kuat. Kuat not only has the backing of the Empire, they also have their own private security and space forces. Then there is the issue I have with the line, Kuat is built to defend against attacks from space, not the ground. If we were talking about invading a place like the Allies did at D-Day, this might have some merit to it. But we're talking about invading from space to land on the ground. If you do not take out the space defenses, then your transport ship will get blown out of the sky. Then there's the issue of characterization, or in this case, the lack of it. Every character in the novel is one note and uninteresting, or just there to fill space. Throughout my synopsis, I did not mention Tabor or Verge because if they were not in the story, then nothing would have changed. Roach gets mentioned because it seems that she would have some sort of character arc. Instead, she shows up, is revealed to be a drug addict, becomes really confident after Nimir becomes captain of the company, then dies. Gadrin is mentioned, but his only defining character trait is that he believes in the rebels' cause. Charmer was apparently important enough to mention, but then he almost never gets mentioned again, and he dies later on. I could go on, but the point is that no one here left any sort of impact on me, and the author could not make me care. Another important note is that the book adds nothing to canon. None of the worlds in the book are used again except for Sullust, and Sullust isn't an invention of Disney. It was first mentioned in Return of the Jedi. None of the ships, weapons, species, technology, force powers, or anything else are new here. Which wouldn't be an issue if the story was good, but it's so lackluster, I was hoping there would be something new that other authors could use. The only other time Twilight Company or any of its characters are mentioned is one short story involving Chalice, and once in an Alphabet Squadron novel. I'm not trying to make some larger statement about Star Wars or Disney with this, but I am saying that this was a waste of time for anyone who read it. I can think of much better novels and much better Star Wars novels. Well, I hope I was able to entertain with this, and I hope you all enjoyed. And if you did, please be sure to like and subscribe and all that jazz, links below in the description. And let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Twilight Company was good, or just another piece of entertainment that fell by the wayside? This has been Shadow Talks, and I will see you next time.